everybody. Darolyn Pierce. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and as mentioned before, with a company called Brooklyn Sports Entertainment. Brooklyn Sports Entertainment, we own properties that you're probably familiar with: Brooklyn Nets, New York Liberty, Barclays Center, and a few other brands and products that we'll get into.
Hi, my name's Chris Detert. I am the co-founder and chief communications officer of Influential, the world's largest influencer marketing company. We've been around for 11 years, have nearly 400 employees, and we, as James said, we were recently acquired by Publicis Group for $500 million.
And I'm James, I'm the CEO and founder of Swayable. So we're a data platform that measures how content changes people's minds. And we're really proud to work with these folks. So I'll tell you real quick how we're going to run the session and then throw it to the interesting content. You're going to get kind of the best of all worlds here. We're going to have a couple of relatively brief talks at the beginning just to hear from the work of both Darolyn and Chris and myself. Then we'll have a little bit of discussion and then throw it at the end to some Q&As. Darolyn, do you want to get us started and tell us a little bit about all the incredible stuff you're doing?
Yep. So at BSE, I oversee our data analytics and insights team. I am not a marketing enthusiast by any means. However, because of the nature of our team, we really sit at the central part of our organization. So we are a support function that is really making sure the resources that are marketing, ticketing, sponsorships, finance, HR, all the teams that really need data-driven decisions and tech to help them optimize their business, we really support and help. And so really what I wanted to start with is talking about this interesting, complex challenge and opportunity that we have as an organization. So I mentioned Brooklyn Nets, New York Liberty, Barclays Center. We also own our G League team out in Long Island. And our company is really trying to figure out how do we redefine this idea of entertainment. So Brooklyn is where we're based, and as we all know, it's a very global brand. Anybody that you say Brooklyn, New York to has heard of it and has probably some sort of idea of what Brooklyn means to them, their cousin, their family member, or their friend. And so what we're trying to do as an organization is how do we make sure we fully understand and grasp the breadth of what it means to have a sports entertainment company in Brooklyn. And so just want to highlight a couple fun facts about our borough and about our company. So 2.7 million people live in Brooklyn. It's the third largest city, and we're the top 5 diverse city in America as well. And we skew very young. So a lot of people that are moving into the Brooklyn area are on the younger side compared to where folks are moving to other cities and states around America. And the last kind of bullet I'll highlight is 61% of the folks that actually live in Brooklyn are non-white. So very diverse population, very young population. And the map on the right just kind of highlights how condensed a lot of our New York fan base is around our arena in Brooklyn. And so what we really wanted to do is figure out, okay, how do we start developing these concepts around creating maybe new products to make sure we're representing the breadth of life of the Brooklyn concept. And so our head of products and experiences kind of did a poll around the organization and asked people, what does Brooklyn mean to you? And when I tell you everybody had a different answer, everybody had a different answer. So much so that it was very hard for us as an organization to even really rally around some themes that make up Brooklyn. And so we partnered with Swayable, and we did some science-based research to really understand, not only in Brooklyn, not only in America, but globally, what does Brooklyn mean to people? And how can we start framing those themes and that framework to different products that we're going to create? What we found was 38% of folks make up their perception by social media. So we have social media that's representing some of our Brooklyn Nets brands, our New York Liberty brands, but is there any other media, maybe assets that we can create as an organization to kind of help dive into that stat? More than half of the folks said that music and food really make up their idea of Brooklyn. And then 37%, that's an overwhelming amount, said that edgy was a makeup of Brooklyn. Demanding, think individuality, think confidence when we hear edgy. And so when we think about the vibes of Brooklyn, 3 things kind of stood out: artistically expressive, authentic, and historically significant. With that, we kind of narrowed down a strategic approach for how do we develop new products, again, really trying to redefine what does entertainment mean for us in our organization. And so our lens is really going to highlight authenticity, creativity and self-expression, diversity and hustle, with the idea that it manifests itself through music, sports culture, style and fashion, food, pop culture, and entrepreneurship. After this study, we've actually come up with 2 new products that we've launched over the last 6 months. One is Brooklyn Wine Club, that is now live. So if any Brooklyn or New York folks are in here and want to join a new wine club, feel free to join that. And then we also acquired Brooklyn Magazine, which is a Brooklyn content material that really helps give folks in Brooklyn, localists and tourists, understand what's happening on the grounds in Brooklyn. So we're really starting to curate different products to bring all this to life. To end with a little research and some work that we've done, I would love to show you guys a video of our launch for the Brooklyn Nets for this 24-25 season. Again, the idea is making sure that whatever we're putting out for consumers to digest and engage with, it's really in capturing those themes and adjectives that we showed before.
In the heart of Brooklyn, where the streets pulse with energy, black tops forges dreams. The Brooklyn Nets aren't just a team, man. We're part of this whole community. It's a journey, building with every rebound, every pass, every shot. It's not always easy, but easy isn't us. And that's why Brooklyn got heart. See, the grind make us stronger. The hustle is just a part of who we are. So let's get it. This ride is just the beginning. And every moment is a step closer. Feel me? What's coming will be worth the fight, I promise you. And with you by our side, we ready for anything. See, this is Brooklyn's team. And we doing it the Brooklyn way. Stamp that.
Go. The Brooklyn way. So the Brooklyn way is the way that we really try to breathe and make that experience come true into all of our content, media, and marketing for our organization. So I'll pass it over for you to tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Thanks, Darolyn. All right, so we will click over and we'll keep with the video theme here. We'll start a new video for you guys. This is the influential sizzle.
absolute pleasure.
Okay, that's a wrap.
So Influential, as I was saying, is the world's largest influencer marketing company. My brother and I started it 11 years ago at a time where influencer marketing was hardly a thing. Social media platforms were just bubbling up. I would say like the primary social platform at that time was Twitter. With Facebook, you had new things coming up like Instagram, which was almost brand new at the time. And the hot platform of the time was Vine. And so we came into this space with a crazy idea to tame the Wild West of social, as we call it. And so what we set out to do was create a platform that would make it so that the world's largest companies, advertising agencies, and the like would feel comfortable to spend their dollars in influencer marketing. And so we did that by creating this platform, but at the same time also creating excitement in the industry by actually creating the first ever influencer house, which was actually a weekend-long party at Coachella in 2014. And when I did that, I actually, previous to that, I had owned a PR company. And using my PR muscle, I reached out to every major PR resource that I had, the largest reach of all of those being Entertainment Tonight. And to my surprise, they actually confirmed and told me they were going to send a crew, and that scared the hell out of me. And so I called the executive producer, who was a friend of mine, and I actually advocated against myself and said, I don't think you know what's going on here. This is not Paris Hilton. This is not Kim Kardashian, the people of that time that, you know, the mainstream influencers. It was, you know, the born and bred stars of social. And so the executive producer told me, you know, it's interesting, Chris, we are the world's biggest entertainment news show, but we're also the oldest skewing entertainment news show. And so I went to my staff, my youngest staff, and I said, what is cool? She said, influencers. And so she said, based on my faith in you, and the reason she had faith in me is because I had produced a gift lounge with her for Entertainment Tonight at Sundance in 2007. And she said, based on that faith in you and what my team sent, I'm sending you the crew. And so we actually ended up having an entire crew, along with Roxy Diaz, the famous commentator, come out and spend a day with us at Coachella. And at that time we had, this was a 5-bedroom house. We had everybody come and stay there. About 50 influencers stayed there. So we had cots all over the place. It was absolute chaos. But it was very, very cool and very nascent. And we had the biggest influencers in the world, the Jake and Logan Paul, Amanda Cerny, King Batch, Rudy Mancuso, all, you know, 10 million followers, $10 million plus sort of people now. We're all just starting at that point. And so we had this really raw, amazing opportunity, and it was basically the concept was get paid to party. And Entertainment Tonight showed up, and we ended up spending all day with them. And I put Logan Paul on TV for the first time in his life, amongst many of the others. And after that weekend, they did their typical Monday recap of a major event. And so they did a 2-minute and 50-second segment on Entertainment Tonight. 2 minutes and 10 seconds was about my 50 creator house, and then the other 40 seconds was about 300,000 person festival down the street. So we knew we were onto something, and we actually ended up doing that 2 months later again at the Electric Daisy Carnival, and then we did it again at Coachella. And then after that, we were a real company and we were venture backed, and we're like, what the hell are we doing throwing these crazy parties with these kids? But it was a great rocket ship that launched us into existence. And then we followed it up by creating a data-based platform full of analytics and rich information that informs influencer marketing in general. And so what we're going to jump into right now is what we call agile marketing. When you're talking about agile marketing, you're really thinking about it in frames of time. So the shortest frame of time we call moments. That's 3 days to 2 weeks. And it's short-lived moments, things that happen. You think about like the corn kid, with Chipotle, or the rock, paper, scissor challenge, things that come in and out of culture really, really quickly. Then you move to the next one that's called signals. That's 3 weeks to 2 months. These are moderately lived trends that, kind of like you think of it as like the jam of the summer sort of thing, like, Charlie XCX this summer with Brat Summer. That was a good example of a signal. And then forces being like the greatest of all of these agile marketing framework. That lasts from 2 months to an evergreen sort of thing. A great example of that is Get Ready With Me. And so the Get Ready With Me craze started by Alex Earl and now copied by so many other influencers is a powerful tool that adds instant relevance that you can plug right into campaigns. So I'll give you a couple examples of that. So we had a really cool campaign with Campbell's Soup, the classic 150 plus year old brand. Show of hands here. It's been about a year and a half now, but who's familiar with the word Riz? All right, good. It's gotten out there. So a year and a half ago, when we ventured out into this campaign, we did some market research and we realized that this word Riz, especially on TikTok, was over-indexing in a crazy way. And so we thought to ourselves, how can we bring this to culture? So we had this campaign where we had a number of influencers cooking at home in the kitchen using Campbell's Soup. And we came to Campbell's with this crazy idea. We said, what do y'all think of us adding Riz to every single one of the creators in this campaign? And they thought we were crazy, obviously. They don't typically go out on a limb when it comes to marketing, but they believed in what we were saying and what we were doing. So they gave us the opportunity to do that. And so all of the ads had some element of the creators talking about Riz, putting hashtag Riz in their content. And to our amazing surprise, it was a huge boon for us and ended up causing $2.7 million in additional sales and a 2.8 offline sales lift. So adding moments of culture can, significantly raise both awareness and profitability. Then I'm going to get into an NBA case study. So since 2018, we've been doing all of the influencer marketing for the NBA. So in 2024, in an effort to increase TV tune-in lift, we went with what we were just talking about, a forced trend, Get Ready With Me, and we applied that to a female-based audience, knowing that Get Ready With Me is a strongly female trending challenge. And we were looking to find something that would add as a hook to potential tune-in customers. And so we delivered this campaign with a number of influencers. And again, it was very, very successful. Over the 3 games of the campaign, there was a 15% lift in female audience, which really just showed that with interesting content and using current trends, you can really create excitement and win over new customers that you didn't have previously. And then just kind of give you a little bit of like the stats of it. That gives you sort of like a baseline of the non-agile campaigns, and that's what we were able to do as a result of our Get Ready With Me campaign. So I'll kick it back over to you, James.
Love it. Amazing. Thanks. I'll tell you a little bit about the Swayable side of the picture, and then I think you can sort of connect the dots here a little bit as we get into the discussion. My own personal story, before I started Swayable, I was at the New York Times, which you can probably hear from my accent. I do live in Brooklyn, but that's not a Brooklyn accent. I was from Australia originally, and I just thought this is a really iconic experience to have storytellers telling these critically important stories about climate change and democracy and the future of the planet. But I kept being sort of nagged by this problem, which is like, how do we know that any of this storytelling is working? Right? These are authentic, important stories. They're not designed just to get a click, right? They're designed to make people really rethink how they see the world. And that's both true of the kind of big picture stuff like this climate change story, but it's also true of marketing. All we have though is these dashboards with clicks and views and likes on them, and you can look very hard at all those dashboards and you won't find a metric for how many people woke up the next day and decided, I want to do something about climate change, right? And as I said, that's true with climate, but it's also true with getting subscribers. Like this, the basic bread and butter work of marketing storytelling. This was what the ads for the New York Times look like for folks in the audience that maybe aren't in what was the average age in Brooklyn now? 37. I'm feeling extremely old. This was going back about 10 years ago. This is what our digital ads look like. They were kind of orange or red rectangles and A/B testing to kind of get the most click-through rates. And then at around that point, they hired the company's first ever CMO, a guy called David Rubin, who had a serious background in marketing. Company had never had a marketer before, at least not a CMO. And he just threw that out, basically. He said, look, keep doing it, but I want to tell a big story about why this brand matters, why it's important. Why should you care so that later you click through? And I guess the big question for folks like myself who do measurement and care about these kinds of analytics questions, my background originally was in science, is could we create a dashboard to answer that question? Can you measure how much I like this brand or I want this product in the same way or with as much ease as you can sort of track click-through rates, basically. And so this is a hotly debated topic, and there's a sort of a big industry out there of people selling you numbers for different things. But the key distinction is that for really important campaigns like the Truth campaign, like any of the really killer brand storytelling that we've just been hearing about, really what you're trying to do is something different from just a bottom of the funnel click-through rate campaign. And so there was a really underdeveloped answer to how do I measure these metrics at the top, favorability, consideration, intent to purchase, those sorts of things. So that's a change in something in your head. So the obvious question is, okay, how do I measure that? And there's a lot of pseudoscience out there. A lot of people will sell you another dashboard for that, crowded dashboard. But we were a group of scientists, and we realized that, rather than going with a sort of pseudoscience approach and just kind of telling people a story that we'd solved it, there was actually a way to answer this question. Namely, if you want to know what someone thinks about your brand, a really good starting point is just to ask them. And if you do that in a really rigorous way, ask a whole bunch of questions like this, but don't just ask 10 people, don't just ask 100, ask 10,000, do it really quickly, do it with really high quality measurements. And do it in the context of a randomized controlled trial study where you're showing some people your ad, those stories we just looked at, and other people are not, and you're trying to understand what's the difference in how much the people want my product or love my brand in the group that saw the ad compared to the baseline that didn't. If you do that, then you've actually proved something. You've proved lift, and you've got a number that answers the question. So, our work at Swayable, supporting some of these fantastic marketing and brand campaigns, is really just about doing that as easily as possible so that you can unlock a bunch of really cool kind of iterative, agile marketing. So that's kind of the background on what everyone's doing. I mean, we wanted to kind of throw this to a little bit of a discussion, and I'm sort of just interested, either of you pick it up. You've got a bunch of data and you've got this killer creative, and often people see that intention, right? Curious to sort of see how you marry the two, either at BSE or Influential. Are they intention, or have you kind of got a good, a good collaboration going between the data people and the folks doing the storytelling?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I will say that our organization has evolved over the last few years. We have a new ownership group that's had our organization over the last 3 to 5 years, and they're very data-driven individuals. We just got a new CEO over the last 2.5 years, and he's also a very data-driven individuals. And so there's a big shift in our organization, really moving from vibes to data-driven decisions. And it's actually a running joke within my team, the data team. We get, I'm going to say, annoyed, maybe this is the right word, when people try to come to us and or people try to solve problems on their own, and they just go off what's their gut feel, what's the vibe, and it's no, you've been doing that for 10 years. The data is saying something else. Why don't you try this? And that culture of really leaning into what the data is saying and leading into a lot of the insights that companies like Swayable are providing is really transcending, I think, the way that we think and the way that we productize a lot of our stuff, as mentioned before. And so that framework that I mentioned at the beginning, where I said we sit in the middle of our organization, we support a lot of the revenue generating departments, that wasn't always the case. Before, what our business intelligence team, we really helped ticketing and sponsorships. And now we are lockstep with our marketing team. And they don't really make a lot of decisions unless there are KPIs, metrics, and information that they feel confident in to say, okay, we know this is really working on TikTok because the data is saying X. let's do this. And or we don't really know what's going to work for Brooklyn Wine Club. We've never had a wine club, but we know these different stats around our internal database of consumers that's been engaging with our brand. And we've done some market research that alludes to these type of premium clientele and consumers. Therefore, we're going to try this, but be agile in a way that we can always shift and do something different. So I think to answer your question, the partnership that data and tech plays in our organization is in a place that it's never been before, to where we can really intimately influence the decisions of leaders and folks of the organization.
And so, like, if you had to say kind of what the secret is for all the aspiring agile marketers out here, I mean, maybe that's too hard a question to give a succinct answer to, but like, what got to that point?
So I think a few things. You mentioned changing the mind, right, of consumers to be able to have emotional connection to your brain. It's really selling your brand to consumers. What I like to tell my team at work is like, hey, we have to sell this concept of data to our folks. Like, we have to change the mind of how marketers think. Like, we can't go off vibes anymore, right? So I think for how this space is evolving, maybe a key to success that I've at least seen work is, one, don't be afraid to try different things, but actually lean into what the data is saying and do some control groups, do some measurements, and what you'll find could be very surprising from maybe what your hypothesis was.
And then, Chris, you are in an interesting position because, these are influencers, so they've got their own stories, right? But, you've got these incredible stats about the impact that the storytelling is having. So, is data and, authentic storytelling intention in your teams at Influential, or do you feel like there's a similar kind of harmony that you've achieved?
Yeah, like as I mentioned at the top, we're the world's largest influencer marketing company, and I can say with confidence, the reason that we are is because of the data-backed approach. At the time that we were getting into the industry, this is 2013, 14, there was a proliferation of, they called them NCNs, multi-channel networks, maker studios and the like. And all of them were all concerned about, they believed that if you owned the talent, that you owned the world. And we saw it completely differently. First of all, we saw the client was the brands and not the creators. The creators are really more of a delivery mechanism, a media delivery mechanism. And so we decided to take that track and really build a data-based platform that allowed for data to choose the best influencer for any campaign. So this is what we started back then, and we keep this true to now. When we get into a brief with a particular brand, we're looking to identify the perfect influencer based on demographics, contextual relevancy, psychographics, all of these things that make up the description of the ideal customer set. And so when we apply that through influencer marketing, we're making sure that we have the perfect targeted audience spoken to through influencers that know how to hit that audience at a perfect way. So, that marriage of data and analytics along with influence, we often say that it's, the marriage of data and science with marketing that really creates the best results.
I feel like, you guys have had this meteoric growth. It's kind of nuts. Like, you're kind of defining this new category in a serious way.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, today, in the world today, in television advertising, it's a $60 billion marketplace. Influencer marketing is actually a $35 billion marketplace. And our prediction is that in the next 3 to 5 years, influencer marketing will actually surpass TV spend. We like to call influencer marketing word of mouth at scale. So everything that influences you in your life, the things that resonate with you most is a suggestion by a family member, a friend, somebody that you respect tremendously. What we identified early on with creators is that they have a built-in germane audience that, if they say, try this, they'll try it. If they say, go here, they'll go there. And so being able to utilize that power that they have over their audience is unlike any other force that we've seen in modern marketing.
Yeah, amazing.
We see that show up too a lot within Brooklyn Nets and New York Liberty specifically, less around concerts, but whenever we actually tap into influencers, not only global influencers, but also local Brooklynite influencers. There's a level of demand, whether it's fan growth, whether it's ticket revenue, whether it's ticket sales, whether it's merch collabs and things of that nature, where the buy-in from our local fan bases is at a level that we sometimes don't see. So
Yeah, and especially in a market like Brooklyn, you can tell that there's that like fervent fandom, and the people of that community mean so much to that audience. But like that's just an example of like the voice of your city is like that proud, you know?
Yeah, it sounded like a really authentic kind of Brooklyn, talk track. But, part of what's so cool about what you've achieved, Darolyn, and the whole team at BSE is, there are Brooklyn fans like in China, right? I mean, so you've crushed it in terms of global growth. I mean, this is not even all of New York City is Brooklyn, but somehow in Shanghai there are people running around, tuning in, streaming, flying over. Like, how does that happen?
So interesting fact, right? 94% of our fans are actually international fans. So only 6% of our fans actually live in America, and a huge chunk of that 94% actually live in China, to your point. And what's interesting is it's such an overwhelmingly amount of individuals who are engaged with us from a social content. The NBA does a really good job of helping support us with partnering with national broadcast and local broadcast over in China to where we can actually broadcast our games. But the overwhelming part really kind of led us as an organization to be the first NBA team that actually has an international marketing team. And that international marketing team, they focus on a lot of different markets, but they also have a subset of just Chinese marketing. And so we have 5 to 7 people, and their sole job is to figure out how do we generate revenue in China. Our ownership group is of Taiwanese, and so that kind of plays into a lot of the impact there with his partnership with Alibaba. And so there's some ownership ties there with the Chinese market. And we also had the big three, right? Kyrie, James Harden, KD for a little bit. And what we learned too was internationally, a lot of people, they follow players. They don't really follow teams. And so that's been a trend in the sports industry that we've seen. And so that was a big staple for us as an organization to grow a lot of the international market. But what that means is, right, as an organization, we have to make sure we're resourced to actually speak to that fan group, right? So we go to their social media channels. We partner with some of their local companies, merch companies, things of that nature. And we put our products where they are so that that way they can still engage with us. And I will say, not only are we doing a lot of things from a marketing standpoint to resonate with that fan in China, but we've also curated a lot of cool assets around our arena, our social media, and in Brooklyn, to where we partner with other organizations as sponsorship. Mm-hmm. And so our sponsorship revenue, when it comes down to partnering with Chinese businesses, has grown exponentially over the last few years. So massive opportunity there for us.
So, I mean, you've got an unusual business. I mean, most people sort of selling a product that's on the shelf, you go and buy it. You've got ticket sales, you've got sponsorships, you've got other events, concerts going on, you've got 2 sports brands. I can now get wine, apparently, which I'm excited about. So, how does the success of all that kind of breed success with the rest? And, do you kind of, as you're kind of filling these, the center, you sort of, what's the connection to the performance also of the sports teams?
Yeah, so one, making sure we're aligned with the right ethos across all of the properties and all the brands, as we mentioned before. 2, I think it's a very interesting question. People ask that all the time. Is like, what's the success of your business? How does that influence maybe the success on the court, and or vice versa? How does the success on the court influence the success of the business? Obviously, if you have a winning team, your business is going to do really well, right? The Warriors, they're leading in a lot of things over the last few years. The Lakers are leading in a lot of things in the last few years. We're going to get there one day, I promise. However, I will say that one of the things that we've really seen work over the last year or so, when maybe we weren't winning on the court, is how do we stay close to basketball operations? Because if our brand is not the same brand on the court as it is on our Instagram page or as it is on our website, the consumers feel that. And so even in the study that we did with you guys and a lot of market research and focus groups that we do with local folks, they say, we want to understand the identity of who you are as a brand and how that aligns with the identity of people on the court. And so how do we make sure there's alignment across that is something that we really focused on over the last few years. And also we did a campaign, a social media campaign that's from blank to Brooklyn. And so it's a content series that we do for our players where we highlight their journey, where they come from, why they decided to come to Brooklyn, what do they love about Brooklyn. And when we have those relationships with the players feel more connected. And when the players feel more connected, that means that they see an identity not only in their team, but in the brand itself. And that shows up in their commitment and how they play. And so there's a 360 kind of influence that's happening that I don't know is always clear to the average Joe.
Sounds more complicated in our business. We just sell credits. So count them up. But Chris, you're working across the whole NBA, right? And I mean, the NBA is like the top social and influencer
Yeah.
Right?
So we've been working with the NBA since 2018. They are the industry leader in social. If you look at their Instagram page, I think it's twice the following of the NFL. And for those of you guys that know sports, the NFL is an absolute dominant force. But for some reason, the league has figured out how to create attention on social channels better than everybody. Amazing stat that will blow you all away. LeBron James personally has more followers on his own Instagram account than take NFL, NBA, NHL all together. Every single person, every single star in that league, you put all of them together and they're still smaller than LeBron James. And the reason why is because it's a star-driven sport. It's a sport that has no helmets. And it's also a sport that has teams of 12 people or less. So it's very focused on the stars of the league. It's also a very global game. Just about every other sport is limited beyond the borders. But when you're talking about basketball, it's truly an international game. So their ability to do social media has been like few others.
And I don't know if anyone happens to remember who the top team on TikTok is for.
Does anybody know who the top NBA team is on TikTok right now?
Brooklyn Nets, baby.
Why is that?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, what we really wanted to make apparent, not only to our fans, but also in the league, was to be leading in how we do social media content. And so we hired some really young TikTok enthusiasts and people that were experts in this space. And they've just done a really great job of using their own personal experiences on TikTok and bringing our brand to life. And so we just put intentional resources into making sure we had the right people putting content on the right spaces.
I love that. And so when you show up, you explained a little bit about how your business works, part of who you've got to appeal to as sponsors. Are they expecting more now that you've got to show them and prove more that, as you get those dollars in from sponsors, in the center, elsewhere, that you're somehow using your superpowers around data and analytics to demonstrate they'll get something?
Yeah, so I'm sure you have a lot to say on this one, but there's an overwhelmingly increasing level of demand from sponsorships and how much they're requesting that you prove an ROI on our partnership. And so what we've done as an organization to stay on top of a lot of that is we've done some really cool studies where we'll survey a lot of our attendees and our fans, and we'll ask them targeted questions about how they recall the sponsor and what assets are influencing whether somebody recalls the sponsor or doesn't recall the sponsor. And so I'll give you a perfect example only because this got into the media last week, so we released it. But we just signed a multi-year deal with Fox 5 for our partnership with New York Liberty to be our media broadcaster. And a lot of the reason why they renewed with us is from some data that we kind of proved ROI. They had a one-year deal with us last year. And what we found was not only did we have an increase in viewership, obviously we won the championship, but we were a good team. But we gave a lot more access to people across America and across Brooklyn to view the viewership. But what we saw was that if you actually knew that Fox 5 was a partner of Liberty, they were 3 times more likely to actually watch Fox 5 in a non-Liberty game. And so that was a stat that we were able to kind of pull from some of that survey research. And the more assets that somebody was to recall, the more assets somebody was to see and therefore recall the partnership, the more likely that they would engage with Fox 5, downloading the app, engaging through TV. So stuff like that, it not only are companies demanding, but you can also get more revenue and leverage a little bit more.
And is it true of the marketers as well? I mean, are they, compared to, early Coachella days, are they sort of showing up with more kind of like, number one item on the agenda is like prove something with numbers, prove that you're generating lift? Yeah,
No, absolutely. I think the excitement of influencer marketing in the early days was checking off the box and saying that you were doing something that was cool and innovative. And that only lasted for so long. And then beyond that, it became how does this translate to whatever my KPI is? Does it translate to sales? Does it translate to foot traffic? So what we started to do was create tools that would enable that. And so in 2018, we created a multi-part attribution model that allowed us to track sales into stores. So if somebody did a social ad with paid media behind it, did somebody walk into a grocery store, drugstore, or big box retailer and actually buy something? For companies like CPG brands like McDonald's, did somebody see an ad and then walk into a certain location? When it comes to TV, like over-the-top television or even regular terrestrial television, ABC or Netflix, for example, did somebody watch a social commercial and then tune in as a result? So those sorts of metrics have become the hallmark of our industry and has really created the moat that allowed us to excel in the way that we do. And we have a 91% client retention rate, and it's largely because once we start working with somebody and we're able to understand what the data says, we're able to rinse and repeat over and over again. And every time we work with the client, we're that much more effective because we have the ability to, in the middle of a campaign, change an influencer out if they're not resonating with the audience. So it's really data science more than anything, wrapped in a really sexy new modern thing that is influencer marketing. But it really comes down to it. It's data and analytics.
So it's probably Q&A time. I don't know if folks in the audience have any questions that they want to ask, or ideas, or provocative statements. Yeah, do you want to come up to the mic, if you don't mind, just to embarrass you further?
So I'm kind of new to this new company and a new app that I want to launch. And part of it is, my idea would be around having influencers that are kind of hyper local to Austin, like having sort of Austin as a test bed. But then listening to you guys, it occurred to me that there might actually be nationally known or internationally known influencers who would be more influential than Austin than even the local folks, right? Like, so let's say it's an app that only works in Austin. Mm-hmm. They still might want somebody from New York helping promote it, right? I don't know. I'm curious about that part. And then also just how do you source influencers for this? Like, do you have a setup? Do you go recruit them? Like, what's the...
Great question.
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of the pros and cons of the local versus the national. If you can get a national influencer to do it at an affordable rate, it's great. It brings recognition far beyond your local market. The fact of the matter is that the larger scale influencers are typically a lot more expensive. So in the case of a local campaign, what I would recommend is to find local creators. For us personally, as Influential, we have a network of 3.5 million creators, but we don't even necessarily stop there. Every project is its own unique thing. So in the case of Austin, we might go beyond our 3.5 million influencers and look for people, really get granular. Like it could be, people in Austin that have a certain household income, that have these certain affinities. So it's all about narrowing the aperture down to finding that like ideal audience to reach. And then, one of the most important tactics that exists in influencer marketing is the paid media strategy behind it. Especially if you're talking about a localized effort like Austin, you're going to want to pay for paid media targeting behind the influencer's ad, because the way that all of the social platforms work and the way that they make money is that they allow influencers to put their content out, but they actually curb the virality of it. They only allow them to reach a small percentage of the audience. And they do that in a purposeful way so that people in media end up having to buy audiences, which is actually part of the ecosystem that feeds the platform. So the platforms make a ton of money through paid media, and it's not something that most people are savvy to. You think that the influencer puts a message out and that's the end of it. It really is a lot about the paid media targeting that goes behind it.
I'm gonna just double down real quickly on the research, like really understanding who's in Austin and what are their affinities for. Do they have a specific affinity for maybe a few brands or a type of brand, and maybe that's not localized? Like maybe that is a space that you can capitalize, that maybe something that's only local to LA but happens to be people that resonate with that who live in Austin. So the more market research that you can do and really understanding the audience, I think can help you drive your decision making around like maybe what are the right influencers or content and or paid media strategy that makes sense. Oh, he's coming back. You
got a follow-up question? All right.
Sit back down there.
To do something like that, you talk about the whole, this is sort of influencer focused, right? But if I were saying, hey, I want a comprehensive marketing campaign or kind of awareness campaign, I would still come to you almost as like you're sort of the new MRM McCann, right? Like you would be the strategist for all of it, even if it goes beyond like the influencer world.
I feel like social data is the single most effective tool in measuring every sort of marketing application. So, you could have a live event strategy, you could have a traditional advertising, a television advertising, and all of it can still be informed through social.
Gotcha. But when I start with you, like if I came to someone like influential, it'd be kind of, we will help you figure out the live events plus the influencer plus the.
Yeah, it's absolutely something we can do.
Interesting.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll sit down this time.
You can just sit in the front. Does anyone else have other questions? Otherwise, I've got one. Oh, Bonin, you gonna ask a question? You've got to walk the longest distance of anybody.
We have a marketing celebrity in our midst here.
Should direct all the questions to Bonin. You'll give definitive answers.
What would the ideal, if you ran, let's say, Pepsi, what would the ideal setup be in terms of how you structured the department? Would it all start with you guys, a component come to you now? Like how would you, if you had white space to just structure it, how would you actually structure it in your ideal world?
Love that question.
Jump that.
I mean, I wouldn't come straight to me. I would come to folks with the big ideas for big stories. And, this whole idea of agile marketing, what we're trying to coach people to do, and I'd love to obviously hear how this looks from you guys' perspectives, is just build in way more points where you're getting evidence about whether what you're doing is working. So it's just going from these I remember when we got started, which, was only 6 years ago, where we'd meet some brands that planned for the whole year what they were going to do. They would shoot stuff sometimes at the beginning of the year for the end of the year. And, that seems crazy now, but, there's versions of that are shorter, but it's still too long, because you just don't know if it's working. And so, take that great idea, great influencer, test it tomorrow. Next week, go back to them. Maybe they want to change it, maybe they don't. But, you're starting a dialogue that makes the creative generate more and more lift over time. Yeah.
I think the saying is, don't let great be the enemy of good. That's, yeah. Yeah, don't let perfect be
Fact check.
there we go. Thank you. But I think that concept is a lot of the foundation for what agile marketing is. Like a lot of companies, a lot of teams, and I've seen this happen, they'll spend a year coming up with a marketing strategy, and it's like, okay, while that may be effective, how do we just start somewhere and learn iteratively over time and adapt and change and pivot instead of trying to get it exactly right? We don't need to get it exactly right. What we need to do is spend more time learning, and the faster we can learn and pivot and change, we'll get to perfect before we would get to perfect if we're just spending all of our resources trying to get it right instead of learning and changing. So
Yeah, I feel like marketing these days, you have to be incredibly prescriptive, and I essentially feel like the convergence of chief marketing officer is like virtually the chief digital officer, and it's very synonymous, and they work so closely together because the first layer of all things is breaking down the data, and every single brand has a certain prescriptive element to it. You have to approach each brand as its own thing, look at the data, kind of read the tea leaves, see what it tells you to do, and then make your suggestions and make your plan according to that.
My follow-up, though, is, and I lived on this world, but how do you know when you've given things enough time to actually get signal of whether it's working or not? Because I think some of the tough questions you always get inside organizations is, this is a brand campaign. 2 years from now, you're going to feel the effects of it. But anyway, but the question is like, how do I know, given fast-paced testing and iteration, how do I know if I've given things long enough to see if they work or not? How do I judge that?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think there's two components, and I try to be really upfront with people. We only measure one of them, right? We look at each individual person effectively. We do this through the groups, and we figure out, okay, if you get a single exposure, you watch something that comes from an influencer, or it's a creative from an agency, how much lift are you likely to get in that instance? But that's not the only thing that goes on. People talk to each other, thoughts evolve, and you have to be realistic that there's some things that you know and some things you don't know. And, I think you can make an argument that certain kinds of stories, need that repetition and need some kind of social digesting of that. And, I think you really do have to go with vibes to some extent with that stuff. But, part of what we say to people is like, look, if you're telling them a story where compared to a couple of alternatives, can see that it demonstrably does nothing right now, and here's another story that another creative had or a different influencer, and it does like 5 points of lift. Well, there's a better bet out of the two, and you can at least take that one.
My feeling on it is it is a marriage of data and science along with human intuition. You obviously read the science of it, and you see, you do test and control methodology, and you look at lift, but you also have to have like a gut feeling of how the stuff is performing and how you're getting reactions to it. So I think a lot of it is really just studying that result and then kind of prognosticating over a longer period of time. Is this going to continue to create lift, or is this an aberration? Is this a momentary thing? So I think seeing the repetition of that success over anywhere from 2 weeks to a month, you can usually predict pretty accurately whether it's going to have long-term success.
Part of what we've been the most excited by is when we've worked with campaigns that have done this kind of repeated iterative testing, that sort of longer-term story can just dramatically take off. We worked with one national campaign where they had 10x more lift from the stories that they were making after 5 rounds of this iteration than at the beginning. And that's a combination of like learning what kinds of stories are actually moving their audience, which ones they find inauthentic, even if they actually are authentic, they just sort of didn't respond well to them. And also just that half of the stuff at the beginning just wasn't working. So, just taking the bad stuff out and like doubling down on the really good stuff and getting better at telling them, those like that increase that's just really from learning about what persuades. It's like the data doesn't give that directly, but when it goes in the heads of the people with the strategy and the ideas, like it's amazing to see it happen.
Yeah, when we're talking about agile marketing, I like the old saying of move fast and break things. Right. Be willing to try, fail, try again, fail quickly, try again. That methodology, especially because when you're talking about influencer and you're talking about social, you're talking about finite moments of culture. So sometimes things, like I gave that 3-part scale. Sometimes things last for a split second, sometimes they last for weeks, and sometimes becomes evergreen. But you got to try enough things. You got to throw a lot of things at the wall and see what sticks.
So what's this summer going to be? It was Brad Summer last summer. Do you know? You don't know?
I don't know yet. I'm interested to see.
I'm a season behind. I'm just going to stick with Brad Summer. That was fun. I like Charlie SCX. Maybe that's a good place to leave it. I think we're probably, I'm guessing, on the...
Yeah, we're just about at time.
Yeah, but I mean, feel free to come up, obviously, and keep chatting. But yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, for coming.
Yeah, thank you for your time, everybody.
Thanks, you guys.